Like, subscribe, and turn on notification for more amazing video. Respect!
He was condemned at the Galactic Council until a young alien woman screamed, "Don't kill my husband!" The vast domed chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with tension as James Baylord stepped through the massive obsidian doors. His graphite diplomatic uniform with its distinctive violet honor sash stood out starkly against the sea of rigid gray-black military attire worn by the alien dignitaries. The silver accents on his cuffs caught the light as he moved confidently across the polished floor, his athletic build and assured posture drawing curious glances from the assembled representatives. "Ambassador Baylord of Earth," announced a monotone voice as James approached the central platform. "Humanity's envoy to the peace negotiations between the Tarian hegemony and the Vesperian Dominion." James nodded respectfully to the assembled council. His short blonde hair and chiseled features remained composed despite the palpable hostility radiating from certain sections of the chamber. This wasn't his first high-stakes diplomatic mission, but the tension between these two interstellar powers made it perhaps the most critical of his career. "Esteemed members of the council," James began, his deep voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber, "I bring greetings from Earth and the United Terran Alliance. We are honored to serve as mediators in these negotiations." From his elevated position at the head of the council, Supreme Arbiter Krell observed the human with unreadable eyes behind his metallic mask. The green-skinned leader of the Galactic Council was legendary for his stoic demeanor and unwavering commitment to interstellar law. "Ambassador," Krell's voice resonated with authority, "your credentials are acceptable. However, I must remind you that humanity is still considered a junior species in galactic affairs. Your role here is purely advisory." James maintained his diplomatic smile. "Of course, Supreme Arbiter. We come to learn as much as to assist." As the formal introductions continued, James noticed a slender figure watching from a private viewing gallery above the main floor. Even at a distance, her sky-blue skin and flowing silver-white hair were striking. She wore a shimmering dress adorned with delicate patterns that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. When their eyes met briefly, she didn't look away, studying him with unmistakable curiosity. Later that evening, at the diplomatic reception, James navigated through clusters of alien dignitaries, carefully building alliances and gathering intelligence. The Tarian and Vesperian representatives remained on opposite sides of the Grand Hall, their centuries-old animosity evident in every calculated glance. "You're either very brave or very foolish to take on this particular assignment, Ambassador Baylord." James turned to find the blue-skinned woman from the viewing gallery standing beside him, her large luminous eyes regarding him with amusement. "I prefer to think of it as appropriately challenged," he replied with a slight smile. "And you are?" "Ikvari," she said, accepting the glass of iridescent liquid he offered her. "Daughter of Supreme Arbiter Krell." James couldn't hide his surprise. "The Supreme Arbiter's daughter? I wasn't aware he had family in attendance." "Officially, I'm here as a cultural attaché," she said, her voice musical and light. "Unofficially, I find these proceedings far more interesting than my father would prefer." Their conversation flowed easily as the reception continued, touching on art, philosophy, and the subtle nuances of interspecies diplomacy. James found himself drawn to her quick wit and insightful observations about council politics. "The Tarians and Vesperians have been at each other's throats for generations," Ikvari explained, gesturing subtly toward the two delegations. "This peace process is doomed before it begins." "That's rather pessimistic," James countered. "History is full of bitter enemies who eventually found common ground." "Perhaps on Earth," she said, her eyes twinkling, "but you haven't seen how deep these grudges run." As the evening drew to a close, Ikvari leaned closer. "If you truly want to understand the dynamics at play here, Ambassador, you should visit the Memorial Gardens tomorrow at sunset. The historical archives there might prove enlightening." Before James could respond, she was gone, slipping away through the crowd with graceful ease. The next morning, James received an encrypted message from Earth Command. "Proceed with caution. Intelligence suggests sabotage attempt imminent. Trust no one." James deleted the message and gazed out at the sprawling alien metropolis beyond his window. The peace talks were scheduled to begin in earnest tomorrow, and already the warning signs were mounting. But something about Igvari's suggestion nagged at him. Was it a trap or genuinely helpful advice? As the twin suns began their descent toward the horizon, James made his decision. He would visit the Memorial Gardens, but he would be prepared for anything. The Memorial Gardens sprawled across several acres at the edge of the diplomatic quarter. A meticulously designed landscape where each plant, stone, and water feature commemorated some significant galactic event. As James approached at sunset, he noted the gardens were nearly deserted, unusual for such a popular location. Golden light from the setting suns filtered through translucent purple foliage, casting strange shadows across the winding paths. James moved cautiously, his diplomatic training keeping him alert while maintaining the casual appearance of a visitor is simply appreciating alien horticulture. The historical archive should be just ahead, he muttered to himself, following the directions Igvari had provided. The archive building was a graceful structure of curved transparent alloy and living plant matter that seemed to grow from the garden itself. James paused at the entrance listening. The silence was too complete. No visitors, no staff, not even the ambient sounds of maintenance drones. "Something's not right," he whispered, but curiosity pushed him forward. Inside, holographic displays illuminated the darkening interior, chronicling millennia of galactic history. James moved through the exhibits, scanning for information about the Taurian-Vesperian conflict. He found himself in a secluded section dedicated to recent diplomatic incidents, when he heard voices from behind a partition. "The human diplomat is becoming problematic," came a harsh, clicking voice that James recognized as belonging to General Drav, the Taurian military representative. "Agreed. His species' insistence on transparent negotiations threatens everything we've worked for," replied a smoother, melodic tone, Ambassador Prell of the Vesperians. James froze. The supposedly bitter enemies were meeting in secret? He edged closer, careful to remain hidden. "The shipment will arrive during the third plenary session," Drav continued. "By then, the humans should be neutralized. The Supreme Arbiter's daughter has shown interest in him. Perhaps she could be useful in discrediting the human," suggested Prell. "Igvari is unpredictable. Better to frame him directly for espionage. We've planted evidence in his quarters already." James's mind raced. The peace talks were a sham, a cover for some joint operation between the supposedly warring factions. And he was about to become their scapegoat. He began to retreat, planning to contact Earth Command immediately when his elbow brushed against a delicate crystal display, sending it crashing to the floor. "What was that?" Drav's voice sharpened. "Someone's here!" Prell hissed. James abandoned his stealth for speed, sprinting toward the exit. He'd nearly reached the door when four security drones descended from concealed compartments in the ceiling, their stun weapons trained on him. "Ambassador Baylard," General Drav emerged from behind the partition, his insectoid features arranged in what passed for a smile among his species. "How unfortunate to find you here, violating restricted areas and eavesdropping on private conversations." "Restricted? This is a public archive," James countered, eyes darting between the drones and the exit. Ambassador Prell glided forward, her elongated limbs moving with unsettling grace. This section was closed for renovation. The signage was quite clear, in all standard galactic languages, including your primitive Earth standard. James realized he'd been set up from the beginning. There was no signage. "Oh dear, it seems the human is not only trespassing, but lying as well," Prell said with mock concern. "What other falsehoods has he been spreading throughout these negotiations?" "I suspect we'll find many when we search his quarters," Drav added. "Security, detain Ambassador Baylard for questioning regarding espionage and sabotage of peace proceedings." The drones moved in, energy restraints humming to life. James considered fighting. His combat training would give him a chance against drones, but assaulting Council security would only validate their accusations. "This is a mistake," James said firmly as the restraints snapped around his wrists. "I'm here on a diplomatic mission with full Council authorization." "Of course you are," Prell's voice dripped with sarcasm. "And I'm sure the classified Vesperian defense schematics in your quarters are just light reading material." As they escorted him from the gardens, James caught sight of a slender figure watching from the shadows. Igvari. Her expression was unreadable, but for a moment their eyes met. Had she set him up? Or was she as surprised as he was? Before he could determine which, the security drones hustled him into awaiting transport. The last thing he saw before the door sealed was General Drav and Ambassador Prell exchanging satisfied nods. "Contact Supreme Arbiter Krell," Drav instructed the transport's AI. Inform him we've apprehended a human spy attempting to sabotage the peace talks. Tell him we have irrefutable evidence." James leaned back against the cold metal seat, mind working furiously. He needed to contact Earth Command, but his communication device had been confiscated. The peace talks were clearly a cover for something else. But what? And where did Ikvari fit into all this? As the transport sped toward the detention center, James knew one thing with certainty. The diplomatic mission he'd prepared for had just become a fight for survival. Not just his own, but potentially for all of humanity's standing in the galactic community. The detention cell was a perfect cube of smooth, featureless material that seemed to absorb both sound and hope. James sat on the single bench, examining the energy restraints still binding his wrists. 3 hours had passed since his arrest, and he'd been left alone. A classic interrogation tactic designed to increase anxiety before questioning began. "Amateur hour," James muttered, using the solitude to his advantage. He'd been in worse situations during his diplomatic career. Once, he'd negotiated a hostage release while suspended over a methane lake on Europa 7. Another time, he'd brokered peace between warring factions while suffering from Arcturian fever. This was just another diplomatic puzzle with higher personal stakes. The cell door slid open, revealing a tall, mantis-like Taurian security officer. "Ambassador Baylord?" The officer's mandibles clicked in what passed for a formal greeting. "I am Chief Interrogator Malk. You stand accused of espionage against both the Taurian hegemony and the Vesperian Dominion." "Convenient timing," James replied calmly, "especially since I just witnessed General Drav and Ambassador Prell meeting in secret." Malk's compound eyes flickered, a subtle tell James had learned to recognize as surprise among Taurians. "A desperate fabrication," Malk recovered quickly. "General Drav would never consort with Vesperian filth." James leaned forward. "Then why was I arrested before any evidence was examined? Why the rush to judgment? Unless someone's afraid of what I might reveal." "The evidence is substantial," Malk countered, activating a holographic display showing documents allegedly found in James's quarters. Classified defense schematics, communication logs with known terrorist cells, detailed sabotage plans for the peace talks. James studied the fabricated evidence. Impressive forgeries. But they made a critical mistake. He pointed to a document timestamp. "This shows I accessed these files during the diplomatic reception, when I was publicly conversing with Supreme Arbiter Krell's daughter. The Council's own security recordings will confirm it." Malk's antennae twitched. Another tell. "The timestamp could be falsified by you." "By me?" "So I'm simultaneously a master spy capable of hacking impenetrable Vesperian security systems, yet sloppy enough to leave evidence in my quarters and get caught eavesdropping?" "Which is it, Chief Interrogator?" The Taurian's mandibles clicked rapidly, their equivalent of nervous fidgeting. James pressed his advantage. "You know something's wrong with this case. You're being used, Chief Interrogator. The question is, by whom and for what purpose?" "Your human psychological tactics won't work on me," Malk insisted, but James could see doubt forming. "Then allow me my legal right to communicate with Earth Command. Surely that poses no threat if your evidence is solid." After a moment's hesitation, Malk produced a communication device. One message, monitored, no codes. James nodded, taking the device. As Malk watched, he composed a seemingly straightforward message requesting legal counsel. But embedded within his choice of formal, diplomatic phrasing was a coded alert that would tell Earth Command everything. Peace talks compromise, Taurian-Vesperian collusion, diplomat framed. After sending the message, James handed the device back. "Thank you for respecting diplomatic protocol." Malk took the device and turned to leave, but paused. "The Supreme Arbiter has ordered an emergency council session regarding your case. You will be presented for judgment in 3 hours." "Rather quick for a trial," James observed. "This is not a trial. The evidence is considered conclusive. This is a sentencing. After Malk departed, James paced the cell, mind racing, 3 hours until he faced the council. His message would reach Earth Command, but any response would come too late. He needed to create doubt among his accusers, exploit the cracks in their alliance. When guards came to escort him to the council chamber, James noted they were a mixed detail. 2 Taurians and 2 Vesperians watching each other as closely as they watched him. Perfect. Interesting security arrangement, James remarked casually as they marched through the corridors. Taurians and Vesperians working together despite centuries of hatred. Almost as interesting as seeing General Drav and Ambassador Prell conspiring in the archives. The guards exchanged uneasy glances but remained silent. I wonder, James continued, does Supreme Arbiter Krell know about their collaboration? Or is he being manipulated too? One of the Vesperian guards hissed, "Silence, human!" Just curious which of your species will be betrayed once your leaders get what they want, James shrugged. Historical precedent suggests neither side honors agreements for long. By the time they reached the council chamber, the guards were visibly uncomfortable, casting suspicious glances at their counterparts. James suppressed a smile. Seeds of doubt planted. The massive doors to the chamber swung open, revealing the full Galactic Council assembled in their tiered seats. At the center of the chamber stood a solitary platform where James would stand to receive judgment. Above them all, Supreme Arbiter Krell sat on his elevated throne, his metallic mask gleaming under the chamber lights. As James was led to the platform, he caught sight of Igvari in a private viewing box, her expression troubled. Their eyes met briefly, and something passed between them. A moment of connection he couldn't quite define. Ambassador James Baylard, Krell's voice resonated throughout the chamber. You stand before this council accused of crimes against galactic peace. How do you respond to these charges? James straightened his shoulders, his diplomatic training kicking in. This wasn't just about his survival anymore. It was about uncovering a conspiracy that threatened the entire galactic community. Supreme Arbiter, he began confidently, I stand ready to expose the true threat to peace in this chamber. Esteemed members of the council, James began, his voice carrying throughout the vast chamber. I stand before you not as a spy, but as a victim of a conspiracy that threatens the very foundation of this galactic alliance. Murmurs rippled through the assembled dignitaries. Supreme Arbiter Krell raised a hand for silence, the gleaming metal of his mask catching the light. Bold claims, Ambassador Baylard. Krell's voice resonated with authority. Evidence suggests otherwise. Evidence can be manufactured, James countered, just as the peace these talks claim to pursue is a fabrication. General Drav rose from his seat, mandibles clicking angrily. The human spews lies to save himself. The evidence is irrefutable. James turned to face the Taurian general directly. Is it, General? Then perhaps you can explain why you were meeting privately with Ambassador Prell in a restricted section of the Memorial Gardens. Strange behavior for supposedly bitter enemies. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Ambassador Prell's elongated form seemed to shrink in her seat. Preposterous, Drav shouted, but James noted the slight tremor in his voice. I witnessed it myself, James pressed on. The two of you discussing a shipment scheduled during the third plenary session. You spoke of neutralizing me because I threatened your operation. James scanned the council members, noting with satisfaction the uncertain glances being exchanged. He was gaining ground. Humanity has always valued transparency and diplomacy, he continued. We believe that lasting peace can only be built on truth. What I've witnessed here suggests that certain parties have a different agenda, one that requires deception and the elimination of those who might expose it. As James spoke, he noticed movement in the upper gallery. 3 figures in nondescript uniforms were positioning themselves at different points around the chamber, their hands moving toward concealed weapons. The human's rhetoric is impressive, Ambassador Prell finally spoke, her melodic voice laced with venom. But rhetoric cannot erase the fact that classified defense schematics were found in his possession. Schematics that mysteriously appeared in my quarters while I attended the diplomatic reception, James retorted. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? One of the suspicious figures in the gallery raised what looked like a compact energy weapon, aiming directly at James. In that same moment, James caught Ikvari's eye. With the slightest tilt of her head, she indicated she'd seen the threat too. Supreme Arbiter, James raised his voice, moving strategically to make himself a more difficult target. I request that the Council security recordings from the Memorial Gardens be examined. They will confirm my account of... A blinding flash of energy cut through the air where James had been standing a split second before. He'd anticipated the shot and dove to the side, rolling behind a ceremonial pillar as chaos erupted in the chamber. "Assassin!" someone shouted as council members scrambled for cover. Security forces rushed in, but they seemed confused about who to target. James used the distraction to work his way toward the main platform where he could address the council again. "This is the true face of the conspiracy," he shouted above the commotion. "When words fail them, they resort to violence." Another energy blast struck near him, sending fragments of decorative stonework flying. James felt a sharp pain as a shard sliced across his cheek, but he pressed on. From his new vantage point, he could see General Drav signaling to one of the assassins, confirmation of his involvement. But before James could point this out, a new piece of evidence appeared on the main display screen. "Attention, council members!" Ambassador Prell's voice cut through the chaos. "Security has discovered additional evidence? Surveillance footage showing Ambassador Baylard accessing restricted Vesperian databases." The footage showed what appeared to be James entering access codes into a terminal. It was clearly doctored, but convincingly so. "This is fabricated," James protested, but his voice was lost in the uproar. Supreme Arbiter Krell rose from his seat, his imposing figure commanding immediate attention. "Order! I will have order in this chamber!" The chaos subsided gradually. James found himself surrounded by security officers, their weapons trained on him. "In light of this new evidence and the disruption caused by the humans' presence," Krell announced, "I am calling for an immediate vote on Ambassador Baylard's guilt. Without a proper defense? Without investigating the assassination attempt?" James protested. "The assassination attempt appears to be of your own orchestration, Ambassador," Krell replied coldly. "A desperate attempt to escape justice?" The vote was swift and decisive. Only a handful of council members abstained. The rest condemned him. James stood tall, refusing to show defeat even as the verdict was announced. "James Baylard, representative of Earth, you are found guilty of espionage, sabotage, and attempted disruption of galactic peace." Krell's voice echoed throughout the now silent chamber. "The sentence is death, to be carried out immediately." Security officers forced James to his knees at the center of the chamber. His uniform was torn from the scuffle, blood trickled from the cut on his cheek, and bruises were forming where he'd been roughly handled. Still, his eyes remained defiant as he looked up at Supreme Arbiter Krell. "Any final words, human?" Krell asked, his tone suggesting the question was merely a formality. Before James could respond, the massive doors to the chamber burst open. A slender figure in a shimmering silver dress rushed in, her sky-blue skin and flowing silver-white hair immediately recognizable. "Father, stop this!" Ikvari cried, her voice cutting through the solemn atmosphere. "Ikvari, you forget yourself," Krell warned. "Return to your chambers. This is not your concern." Instead of obeying, Ikvari ran to James, dropping to her knees beside him, her large, luminous eyes filled with tears as she faced the council. "Don't kill my husband!" she cried out, her voice trembling with emotion. The chamber fell into stunned silence. James himself couldn't hide his shock as he stared at Ikvari. "What madness is this?" Krell demanded, rising from his throne. "We were married 3 cycles ago, in accordance with the ancient rites of stellar binding," Ikvari declared, her voice growing stronger. "Under galactic law, Article 7.3 of the Familial Protection Statutes, no spouse can be executed without a full investigation and the right to defend themselves with the assistance of their bonded partner." The council erupted in confusion once more. Supreme Arbiter Krell's mask betrayed no emotion, but his rigid posture spoke volumes. "Is this true, Ambassador Baylard?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. James looked at Ikvari, seeing the desperate plea in her eyes. Whatever game she was playing, she'd just thrown him a lifeline, and in that moment, he made his choice. "Yes," he replied firmly. "Ikvari is my wife." "This is outrageous," Supreme Arbiter Krell's voice thundered through the council chamber. My daughter bound to a human? Impossible. Not impossible, Father, Igvari replied, her voice steady despite the tension. The stellar binding ritual requires no witnesses or official registration. Only the consent of both parties and the sacred words spoken under the light of 3 stars. Krell's metallic mask betrayed no emotion, but his rigid posture spoke volumes. Take them both to the high-security detention block while we investigate these claims. He turned to his security chief. Separate cells. No communication. With respect, Supreme Arbiter, the security chief replied hesitantly. The familial protection statutes explicitly forbid separating bonded pairs during investigation periods. A low hiss escaped from behind Krell's mask. Then place them in a containment cell with full surveillance. I want guards posted at all times. As they were escorted from the chamber, James felt Igvari's hand slip into his. Her touch was cool against his skin, her slender blue fingers intertwining with his larger human ones. Despite the circumstances, he felt an unexpected surge of warmth at the contact. The containment cell was more comfortable than James had expected. A modest living space with basic furnishings, including a single sleep platform. Once the guards had departed and the energy barrier sealed them in, he turned to Igvari. I think you have some explaining to do, he said quietly, mindful of the surveillance. Igvari moved closer, her silver-white hair catching the light as she tilted her head up to meet his gaze. They're monitoring visual but not audio, she whispered, her breath warm against his ear. My father's security systems have vulnerabilities I've learned to exploit. Smart, James murmured, impressed. Now about this marriage. A necessary deception, she replied, her large eyes searching his face. I couldn't let them execute you. Not when I know the truth. Which is... Igvari glanced at the surveillance devices, then guided James to sit beside her on the sleep platform. She leaned in close, as if sharing an intimate moment rather than classified information. The peace talks are a cover for something much worse, she explained, her lips nearly brushing his ear. General Drav and Ambassador Prell aren't just collaborating, they're puppets. There's a third party manipulating both empires. Who? James asked, instinctively placing his arm around her shoulders to maintain their intimate posture for the cameras. The Nexus Consortium, Igvari replied, a shadow organization of weapons developers and war profiteers. They're planning to trigger a full-scale interspecies war, one that would devastate multiple worlds, including Earth. James tensed. How do you know this? I've been investigating them for years, she said. My position as the Arbiter's daughter gives me access to information others can't reach. I've compiled evidence, but I needed someone I could trust to help expose them. And you chose me? A human you barely know? Igvari pulled back slightly, her luminous eyes meeting his. Humans have a reputation in the galaxy, Ambassador Baylard. You're unpredictable, resourceful, and stubbornly principled. When I saw how you handled yourself at the reception, I knew you might be the ally I needed. So you sent me to the Memorial Gardens knowing I'd discover the meeting? I hoped you would, she admitted. I didn't anticipate they'd move against you so quickly. James studied her face, searching for deception, but finding only earnest determination. You took an enormous risk claiming to be my wife. I did what was necessary, she replied, a slight smile curving her lips. Besides, the look of my father's face was worth it. Despite everything, James found himself chuckling. It was quite the performance. As they talked through the night, strategizing in whispers while maintaining the appearance of a married couple reconnecting, James felt a growing connection with Igvari. Her intelligence, courage, and dry humor reminded him of qualities he admired in humans. Yet there was something uniquely alien in her perspective. A different way of seeing the universe that he found increasingly fascinating. The artificial night cycle dimmed the lights in their cell, casting soft shadows across Igvari's blue skin. In the muted glow, her eyes seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. We should rest, she suggested, glancing at the single sleep platform. I'll take the floor, James offered. Igvari shook her head. The surveillance would find that suspicious for a married couple. She patted the space beside her. I promise not to bite. unless you're into that sort of thing. Her teasing smile caught him off guard. As they settled onto the platform together, James was acutely aware of her proximity, the subtle, sweet scent of her hair, the coolness of her skin where it brushed against his, the gentle rhythm of her breathing, all combined to create an unexpected intimacy. "James," she whispered in the darkness, using his first name for the first time. "There's something else you should know." "What's that?" "The reason I've been so interested in humans." She hesitated. "Your species possesses genetic traits that could save my people from extinction." James turned to face her, their faces now inches apart. "What do you mean?" "My species is facing a genetic degradation crisis," she explained. "Centuries of selective breeding for political alliances has led to serious genetic defects. But human DNA, it's remarkably adaptive, resilient. Initial research suggests compatibility that could reverse the damage." "Is that why you chose me specifically?" James asked, suddenly uncertain about their growing connection. Igvari's hand found his in the darkness. "I chose you because you were the right person for exposing the conspiracy. The genetic compatibility is a separate matter." She paused. "Though I admit, learning about you these past days has been enlightening." The warmth in her voice stirred something in James. In the dim light, he could see her studying him with undisguised interest. The tension between them shifted, becoming something electric and undeniable. "We should probably make this look convincing," James murmured, his hand gently brushing a strand of silver-white hair from her face. "For the surveillance," Igvari agreed, her voice soft as she moved closer. "For the surveillance," James echoed as their lips met. What began as a performance for watching eyes quickly transformed into something genuine and passionate. The differences between their species seemed to fade away as they discovered a surprising compatibility that transcended biology. In the quiet darkness of their cell, they found a connection neither had anticipated, one that would bind them together against the conspiracy threatening both their peoples. James woke to the gentle hum of the cell's energy barrier, and the warmth of Igvari curled against him. Their night together had transformed what began as a diplomatic ruse into something genuine, a connection that transcended their biological differences and cultural divides. "Morning," Igvari murmured, her luminous eyes blinking open. "Or whatever passes for morning in a detention cell." James smiled, brushing a strand of silver-white hair from her face. "Best night in custody I've ever had." Their intimate moment was interrupted by a harsh buzzing sound. The surveillance system in their cell flickered, then went dark. "That's not supposed to happen," Igvari said, instantly alert. A muffled thud came from outside, followed by the sound of a body hitting the floor. James was on his feet immediately, positioning himself between Igvari and the door. The energy barrier dissipated, revealing a human woman in a sleek black uniform bearing the insignia of Earth Command Special Operations. "Ambassador Baylard," she said crisply. "Commander Reyes, Earth Command. We received your coded message and are here to extract you." "Commander," James acknowledged with surprise. "That was faster than expected." "We were already in the sector monitoring the peace talks," Reyes explained. "We have a stealth vessel docked at Maintenance Bay 7. We need to move now. Our window is closing." James turned to Igvari, who was already gathering the few possessions they had in the cell. "She's coming with us." Commander Reyes frowned. "Sir, our orders are to extract you only. The diplomatic situation is complicated, I know," James interrupted, "but she's the key to exposing a conspiracy that threatens Earth and multiple other worlds. And technically, she's my wife." Reyes's eyebrows shot up, but her training kept her from asking the obvious questions. "Understood, sir, but we need to move, now." As they stepped over the unconscious guards in the corridor, Igvari touched James's arm. "Wait. My evidence cache, we can't leave without it." "Where is it?" James asked. "Hidden in my private quarters. 3 levels up, eastern wing." Commander Reyes checked her tactical display. "That's in the opposite direction of our extraction point, and security will be alerted to our presence any minute." "Then we split up," James decided. "Igvari and I will retrieve the evidence. You clear the path to the extraction point and prepare for immediate departure." With all due respect, sir, that's not protocol, Reyes objected. Neither is leaving behind evidence of a conspiracy that could lead to interstellar war, James countered. We'll meet you at the bay in 20 minutes. Reyes reluctantly agreed, handing James a compact energy pistol and communication device before heading toward the maintenance bays with two of her team members. James and Igvari moved swiftly through the corridors, using Igvari's knowledge of the station's layout to avoid security checkpoints. They had nearly reached the eastern wing when alarms began blaring throughout the station. "They've discovered our escape," Igvari said, pulling James into a service alcove as a security team rushed past. "We need a distraction," James muttered, scanning their surroundings. Igvari's eyes lit up. "I have an idea." She accessed a nearby terminal, her fingers flying across the alien interface. "My father's security protocols have a flaw. If multiple breaches are detected simultaneously, the system prioritizes certain areas over others." Within moments, alarms began triggering across distant sections of the station. Security teams diverted, leaving their path relatively clear. "Impressive," James remarked. "I've had years to study this system's weaknesses," she replied with a mischievous smile. "Being the Arbiter's daughter has its advantages." They reached Igvari's quarters without further incident. The spacious rooms reflected her status. Elegant furnishings and flowing organic designs, walls adorned with artworks from across the galaxy. "The evidence is here," she said, approaching what appeared to be a decorative wall panel. With practiced movements, she revealed a hidden compartment containing a small data crystal. "Everything I've gathered on the Nexus Consortium, financial records, communications, weapon schematics." As she secured the crystal, the door to her quarters slid open. They spun around to find Supreme Arbiter Krell standing in the doorway, flanked by his personal guards. "I suspected you might come here," Krell said, his voice cold behind his metallic mask. "Disappointing, but not surprising." "Father," Igvari began, but Krell raised a hand to silence her. "I received an interesting communication from Earth Command just before the alarms began," Krell continued. "They expressed concern about their diplomat and requested an emergency meeting." Curious timing. James stepped forward. "Supreme Arbiter, we have evidence of a conspiracy that threatens not just the peace talks, but the stability of the entire sector. The Nexus Consortium is manipulating both the Taurian hegemony and the Vesperian Dominion to trigger an interstellar war." "Bold claims from a convicted spy," Krell replied. "Not claims, facts," Igvari interjected, holding up the data crystal. "Everything is here, Father. Financial trails, intercepted communications, weapons shipment manifests. General Drab and Ambassador Prell are merely pawns in a larger game." Krell was silent for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he dismissed his guards with a gesture. Once they were alone, he removed his metallic mask, revealing a face marked by age and wisdom, and eyes remarkably similar to Igvari's. "I have suspected something was amiss for some time," he admitted, "but I lacked concrete evidence." "You believe us?" James asked, surprised. "I believe my daughter has never lied to me about matters of galactic security," Krell replied. "Her methods are unorthodox, but her judgment has proven sound." He fixed James with a penetrating stare. "This alleged marriage, however, was necessary to save his life," Igvari finished, "but not entirely." She glanced at James, a slight smile playing on her lips, fictitious in spirit. Before Krell could respond, James's communication device buzzed. Commander Reyes's voice came through, urgent and strained. "Ambassador, we have company. Nexus operatives have breached the maintenance bay. We're holding them off, but our window is closing fast." "We're on our way, and yeah," James replied, then looked to Krell. "Supreme Arbiter, we need to get this evidence to Earth Command. From there, we can present it formally to the full council." Krell considered for a moment and then nodded. "Go. I will create a diversion to cover your escape." He replaced his mask. "And Ambassador Baylord, if you truly care for my daughter as she seems to care for you, keep her safe." "With my life," James promised. As they raced toward the maintenance bay, dodging security patrols in the growing chaos, Igvari squeezed James's hand. "I never expected my father to help us." "People can surprise you," James replied. "Even green-skinned alien arbiters with intimidating masks." Igvari laughed. a sound that, despite everything, filled James with hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Human and alien, united against a common threat, they rounded the final corner to find Commander Reyes and her team exchanging fire with black-clad operatives. The Earth Command stealth vessel waited beyond, its engines humming with readiness. "Ready?" James asked, gripping his energy pistol. Ikvari's eyes gleamed with determination as she drew a concealed weapon of her own. "Ready?" Together, they charged into the firefight, their destinies now irrevocably intertwined. The maintenance bay erupted in chaos as James and Ikvari charged forward. Commander Reyes and her team provided covering fire, their precision shots forcing the Nexus operatives to scatter. 10 meters to the ship!" Reyes shouted over the din of energy weapons. James fired his pistol, dropping a black-clad figure that had been aiming at Ikvari. She moved with surprising grace, her own weapon finding targets with deadly accuracy. "Almost there!" James called, seeing the ship's entry ramp just ahead. A blinding flash of energy erupted from their right. James felt the heat of it pass his shoulder, but Ikvari's cry of pain told him she hadn't been so fortunate. She stumbled, clutching her side where the energy blast had torn through her shimmering dress, revealing scorched blue skin beneath. "Ikvari!" James caught her before she fell, lifting her into his arms in one fluid motion. "I'm fine," she insisted through gritted teeth, though the spreading stain on her dress told a different story. "Cover us!" James shouted to Reyes as he sprinted the final distance to the ship, cradling Ikvari against his chest. They made it aboard just as another volley of energy blasts struck around them. The ramp sealed shut behind them, and the ship immediately lurched into motion. "Get us out of here!" Reyes commanded the pilot as she secured the entry hatch. James carried Ikvari to the ship's medical bay, his heart pounding with fear as her breathing grew shallow. Her normally vibrant blue skin had taken on a pale, almost translucent quality. "Stay with me," he urged, laying her gently on the examination table. The ship's medical officer, Dr. Chandler, immediately began scanning her with handheld diagnostic equipment. His expression grew increasingly concerned. "The energy weapon caused significant internal damage," he reported. "She's losing blood rapidly, and her system is going into shock." "Can you help her?" James demanded. "Her physiology is different from anything in our database," Chandler admitted. "I can stabilize her temporarily, but she needs specialized treatment." The ship shuddered as it evaded pursuit. Through the viewport, James could see they had cleared the station and were accelerating toward open space. "We can reach Earth in 6 hours at maximum speed," Reyes informed him. "Our medical facilities, there might—" "She doesn't have 6 hours," Chandler interrupted grimly. Ikvari's eyes fluttered open, finding James's face. "The data crystal," she whispered. "Don't lose it." "Forget the crystal," James said, taking her hand. "We need to save you." A weak smile touched her lips. Always the diplomat, prioritizing the mission. James turned to Chandler. "What about a blood transfusion? Could that help?" "With what?" Chandler asked incredulously. "We don't have compatible alien blood on board." "Use mine," James said firmly. Chandler shook his head. "Human blood would kill her. The biological differences—" "Not necessarily," Ikvari interrupted weakly. "Remember what I told you, James? About human DNA being uniquely compatible with my species?" Understanding dawned on James. The genetic adaptability she mentioned, could it work? Chandler looked skeptical but began running rapid analyses. After tense moments, he looked up in astonishment. "This is unprecedented. Her species has receptor sites that can actually adapt to human blood cells. Theoretically, a transfusion could work, but it's extremely risky." "Do it," James insisted. "Ambassador, I must advise against—" "That's an order, Doctor." As Chandler prepared the transfusion equipment, Reyes approached with news. "We've outrun the pursuers, but we've received an urgent communication from Supreme Arbiter Krell. He's calling for an emergency joint tribunal between Earth and the Council in 12 hours. "Perfect timing," James said grimly, rolling up his sleeve as Chandler inserted the collection needle. "By then, we'll either have saved Ikvari and exposed the conspiracy, or—" He didn't finish the thought. He couldn't. The transfusion process was unlike anything in medical textbooks. As James's rich red blood flowed into Ikvari's blue veins, her body initially rejected it, causing her to convulse. Chandler nearly aborted the procedure, but then something remarkable happened. Her system began adapting, her cellular structure reconfiguring to accept the human blood. "It's working," Chandler murmured in amazement. "Her vital signs are stabilizing." Hours passed as James remained by her side, his own strength diminishing as more of his blood sustained her. Finally, color returned to her skin, a slightly deeper shade of blue than before, with an almost imperceptible rosy undertone. When Igvari finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was James dozing in a chair beside her, his hand still clasping hers. "You look terrible," she whispered, squeezing his fingers. James startled awake, relief flooding his features. "You don't look so bad yourself, for someone who was nearly killed." "Your blood," she said, touching her side where the wound was already healing at an accelerated rate. "It did more than save me. I can feel it changing me, strengthening me." "Human resilience," James smiled weakly. "One of our better qualities." By the time they reached Earth, both had recovered enough to prepare for the tribunal. The Earth Command headquarters in Geneva had been chosen as neutral ground for the historic joint session. Representatives from both the Galactic Council and Earth's governing body assembled in the Grand Chamber, with Supreme Arbiter Krell presiding alongside Earth's Secretary General. James and Igvari presented their evidence methodically. Financial records showing Nexus Consortium's manipulation of both empires, communications proving General Drav and Ambassador Prell were paid operatives, and weapon schematics demonstrating the devastating potential of the conflict they had planned to trigger. The shipment mentioned in their conversation, James explained, was a cache of prototype planet-killer weapons designed to be deployed against civilian targets on both sides, ensuring mutual destruction. The tribunal was swift and decisive. General Drav and Ambassador Prell were arrested, along with dozens of Nexus Consortium operatives identified in Igvari's evidence. With the conspiracy exposed, genuine peace negotiations could finally begin. 3 months later, James stood in a garden overlooking Lake Geneva, adjusting the formal diplomatic uniform he hadn't worn since his ill-fated mission to the council station. The violet honor sash had been replaced with one of shimmering silver, a gift from Supreme Arbiter Krell. "Nervous?" Commander Reyes asked, approaching in her dress uniform. "Diplomats don't get nervous," James replied with a smile. "We get strategically apprehensive." "Well, your bride is ready," Reyes informed him. "And she looks not human, but definitely stunning." The ceremony combined traditions from both Earth and Igvari's homeworld. Supreme Arbiter Krell himself conducted the proceedings, his normally stern demeanor softened for the occasion. When he removed his mask to perform the final blessing, many in the audience gasped. It was the first time most had seen the Arbiter's face. "Through blood shared and lives saved," Krell intoned, "these two have already formed bonds stronger than any formal union. Today we merely acknowledge what the universe has already joined." As James and Igvari sealed their vows with a kiss, a human tradition she had enthusiastically embraced, applause erupted from the assembled guests, human and alien alike. Later at the reception, Earth's Secretary General raised a toast. "To Ambassador and Lady Baylord, whose union represents more than a marriage. It symbolizes a new era of cooperation between our peoples and proof that humanity's greatest strength is not our technology or our determination, but our capacity to connect across the stars." James pulled Igvari close, marveling at how her blue skin now carried subtle patterns that matched his own genetic markers, a permanent reminder of the blood they shared. "Not bad for a diplomatic mission that nearly got me executed," he murmured against her hair. "I told you humans have a reputation for being unpredictable," she replied with a smile. "Though I admit, I didn't expect to end up actually married to one. Technically, according to your claim in the council chamber, we were already married. A diplomatic necessity that became a biological reality," she said, touching the place where his blood had saved her life. "And now a legal truth." As they looked out at the gathering, humans and aliens mingling, former enemies engaged in genuine conversation, James felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not just for averting a war or exposing a conspiracy, but for proving what humanity had always believed, that even across the vast differences of species and stars, connection was possible. "What's next for us?" Igvari asked, her large eyes reflecting the starlight beginning to appear in the evening sky. James smiled. I hear the Galactic Council needs a new human-alien liaison team, someone who understands both worlds. Sounds perfect, she replied, leaning into his embrace, as long as we're together. Above them, the stars beckoned, no longer distant and alien, but a shared frontier for a future neither could have imagined when they first met in that council chamber, where a desperate cry of "Don't kill my husband" had changed everything.